The SS Bannockburn. The Bannockburn was owned by the Montreal Transportation Company of Montreal, Quebec. She was built by Sir Railton Dixon and Company of Middlesbrough, England, and she was launched in 1893. The Bannockburn was a lake freighter, and she had a tonnage of 1,620 tons. She could also carry a net tonnage of 1,035 tons. For length, she came in at 245 feet. Her beam was 40 feet, and she had a depth of 18 feet. She was also pushed along by one propeller with a triple expansion steam engine and 2 boilers. It's also interesting knowing here that the Bannockburn often towed the 4-masted schooner behind her, the barge Mendoza. The Bannockburn could carry a crew of 20 people aboard her, all throughout her cargo deliveries on the Great Lakes. Once, on October 15, 1897, the Bannockburn actually technically sunk. This was under Captain John Irving, and she had a load of grain. The Bannockburn was destined for Kingston, Ontario, and she was coming from Chicago, Illinois. While she was out, the Bannockburn struck the wing wall of lock number 17 of the Welland Canal. This had sprung a huge leak on her and sent her to the bottom of the shallow canal. She took on over 9 feet of water before finally resting at the bottom. There were, fortunately, no deaths in this incident, and she was later raised. Prior to this first sinking, she also had some bad damage. This was when she ran aground on the rocks near Snake Island Light on the morning of April 27th. The Bannockburn was going full speed. However, she was actually able to stay afloat after dumping 30,000 bushels of grain cargo. Again, nobody was injured or killed, thankfully. The infamous and ill-fated voyage of the SS Bannockburn began at the Canadian lakehead near what is now known as Thunder Bay. She was under the command of Captain George R. Wood. The Bannockburn was downbound, and she was carrying 85,000 bushels of wheat. She was leaving the city of Fort William on November 20th and was headed for Georgian Bay. She, however, suffered a slight grounding, but with no apparent damage on her, as she was heading out to the open lake. This caused her departure to be delayed by 1 day. The following day, again, she recommenced her journey on the 21st, sometime later in that day. Captain James McCaw of the upbound Algonquin, another lake freighter, also reported viewing her through his binoculars, about 7 miles to the southeast of him. And this was about 80 miles off of the Keweenaw Point, and 40 miles off of Isle Royale. Captain James was well acquainted with the Bannockburn and her profile, and he stated that he viewed her several times over the course of a few minutes to note her progress. However, at some certain moment, he attempted to spot her again and was actually surprised when he was unable to do so. He blamed this unexplained disappearance, though, on some somewhat foggy weather, and he didn't think much more about it. Later, a powerful winter storm ravaged across Lake Superior that night at around 11 p.m. The night watch pilot house crew of the passenger steamer Huronik was also upbound on the lake. She reported seeing lights on a ship as they passed in the storm, which they believe were in the pattern of those of the SS Bannockburn. However, there were no signals of distress that were observed or heard, and the two ships passed each other without any thought of it. The SS Bannockburn was reported overdue the following morning at the Soo Locks. However, because of the weather conditions the previous night, this was not considered unusual. But she unfortunately did not report again for several more days. And this began to grow the fear that she may have been lost in that terrible storm. On November 25th, the steamer Frank Rockefeller passed through a field of floating debris near Standard Rock Light. This may have been that of the SS Bannockburn. However, at the time of seeing this, the Bannockburn had not yet been reported lost, and the crew of the Rockefeller did not know what might have happened to cause this debris field. Finally, by November 30th, the ship and crew were officially given up as lost. But by November 26th, the families of the SS Bannockburn grew distressed, and under pressure from them, a Mr. L.L. Henderson, a manager of the Montreal Transportation Company, actually claimed that he had received a wire from the Chicago office of the Underwriters Association, which was providing insurance coverage for the ship. He told a local newspaper, the Fort Williams Times-Journal, that the message read, "The steamer Bannockburn has being located on the north shore of Lake Superior, opposite Michipicoten Island, and the crew is safe." However, he had later admitted that he had no positive information as to the whereabouts of the Bannockburn, but he had based his hopes on this assertion of news that he had heard from the Germanic. This was another freighter, and she had been safely anchored there as well. After some time, the underwriters came to the conclusion that the Bannockburn had stranded on Caribou Island. This island is surrounded by a dangerous reef, and its lighthouse actually had been intentionally turned off on November 15th. If the captain of the SS Bannockburn had been hoping to spot its warning light in the darkness of the storm on the 21st of that night, the only evidence he would have had of his close proximity would have been the shock of the hull striking the reef itself. On Friday, December 12th, the captain of the Grand Marais Life-Saving Station actually found a cork life preserver from the Bannockburn. This had washed ashore on the beach. This, however, was the only item known from the wreckage of the ship to ever be discovered. Captain Wood from Port Delouise, Ontario, was actually the oldest person aboard the Bannockburn. He was only 37. However, most of the rest of his crew were between the ages of 17 and 20. His first mate, Alex Graham, was also from Port Delouise, Ontario. One of the ship's two wheelsmen, Arthur Callahan, was only 16 years old. Even though the Bannockburn was still considered to be of recent manufacture, at 9 years old it was still thought to be almost new. But the overall and inexperience of her crew may have been a factor which caused her to sink. These very young crews, however, were common on the Great Lakes at the turn of the 20th century because they were inexpensive to hire and shipping firms had strong financial incentives and no legislative reason not to take advantage of this whenever they could. There are a lot of theories as to what went wrong that night to the Bannockburn. Captain McCaw made the proposal that the ship might have experienced a boiler explosion, although he did not hear one and there was no charred wreckage in the area of her last sighting. On the other hand, the, at that time, uncharted danger of the Superior Shoal might have also been the cause. When the Sioux locks were drained at the end of that season, a hull plate from a ship was found in the lock. It was supposed to have belonged to the Bannockburn. Ultimately, until the Bannockburn is found and discovered in Superior, we just simply do not know what happened to her. The only known memorial to the SS Bannockburn is a stone tablet in a church in Port Delouise, Ontario. It is in memory of her captain and was purchased by his brother. And that is the story of the SS Bannockburn and her mysterious disappearance. Wow, just right off the bat, learning of the age of these poor crew members on this ship. I mean, Captain Wood was only 37, and I'm only 34, but he was 37, and then the rest of his crew was between the ages of 16, 17, and 20. Man, that's so young. I mean, look at most 16-year-olds today and imagine them being out on Lake Superior trying to fight through a storm and sail a ship through all of that. I can't picture today's 16-year-olds doing that, but man, this must have been some incredible courage by them doing that. But the fact that they were still sought after by these companies, these shipping firms, because they wanted to save money and send these basically kids out there to do that, just unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable that was something that took place like that. But still, I mean, it's these poor men made a fight for their lives out there, and it's probably what happened. They got overwhelmed by some serious waves or the winds, or they may have even maybe the ship even could have started to break apart, even though they had said that it was still pretty new considered after her building. That's not uncommon for these still somewhat sturdy ships to break apart. They don't have to be old and rusty. That could have played a factor into this. Or maybe she nosedived because of a Three Sisters event and three waves hitting her at just the right time and just the right speed and all of that. Very sad. Very, very sad. And I hope it wasn't a long suffering for them. I hope it was, I hope these poor men did not suffer that long. And I do very much hope that this wreck is found so that can really bring some answers to this. The whole Flying Dutchman of the Great Lakes, because people have claimed to have seen her ship out in mirages or something out on Lake Superior out there. I don't know about all these claims. All 20 of these crew members went down on the ship, and there were no bodies ever recovered. But these sightings are, I don't know how old they were, but especially today, I think it adds a lot of ignorant superstition and stuff to this ship, that went through a obviously horrible event and got lost. So that's the perspective I'm trying to keep of this. I'm not trying to encourage dumb ghost stories on this ship. I'm not saying other people are meaning ill by it, but at least for me, this is a ship that went through a terrible storm, and these poor men, very, very, very young men, went through a tragic event. So I hope that this ship is found, and I hope that it can put at ease the minds of the family and friends, because there are still today a lot of family members that are alive, from this was their great-great-grandfather, or this was their great-great-uncle, or something like that. There are still family members from these old ships that are still alive today. I know I'm going on a bit of a tangent on this end part here, but I'm very passionate about these crew members and families and friends that experience these horrible, tragic losses, and to give them the due closure and as much peace, that they can have through all this. And I hope this ship is found. I will be one of the happiest people jumping for joy when this ship is found. I really hope it is. But anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What are some of your theories or guesses as to what could have happened to her? It's definitely a mystery, that's for sure, but she was spotted several times and then was gone relatively quick after that, so it had to be a very quick incident of her sinking here and her disappearance. So, but with all that being said, thank you guys so very much for all the support, and thank you for enjoying this story with me, and I hope you have enjoyed it as much as I have. And until next time on Songs of the Great Lakes, God bless you all.